Hi everyone, welcome to video 21. We're going to be moving from taste into smell. Okay, so just like with taste, we're going to do basically the structure of these receptors. So they're kind of similar to taste buds, but we'll look at some differences. We're going to see where they are, where they're located, and then we'll take a look at that physiology again. We'll end it with the functions of smell, and then we'll move into vision after that. Okay. So with smell, just like we did with taste, smell has another name. So smell is also called olfaction. And when we talk about the sensory portion of our cortex that deals with smelling stuff, it's the olfactory cortex. So what we're going to look at is a smell receptor, olfactory receptor. Okay, so let's just try to make some transitions from taste into smell. So instead of a gustatory cell, now I have an olfactory receptor cell. I still have supporting cells and basal cells, so that's all the same. Instead of a gustatory hair, I have an olfactory cilia. So that's going to be these are all olfactory cilia coming off of these olfactory receptory cells. And then we have these filaments of olfactory nerves, which is basically the axons of all these olfactory receptor cells, but we'll look at that in just a sec. So how I'm going to draw this is we have our nose, and in the roof of our nose we have different types of membranes. So one of these is a mucous membrane here. Or I should say the inside of our noses are mucous membranes, and within that mucous membrane we can have an olfactory receptor. So if you guys remember when we studied bones, we talked about this bone called the ethmoid bone. So I'm just going to draw the bone flat like this. If I was drawing it from the top, let's say I'd be looking at like this, it would have a bunch of holes in it. And this specific part of the ethmoid bone, so that word is ethmoid bone. Within this ethmoid bone, we have this portion called the cribriform plate, which is this portion that has all of these holes. So just imagine that there's these holes all over the surface of this thing. And then underneath to that, we have this mucosal layer, which is this moist membrane. And within that, I have these olfactory receptor cells. So let's do red for that. So extending through that cribriform plate, through that hole in this mucosal layer, I'm going to have these olfactory receptor cells. So olfactory receptor cells, I'm not going to draw supporting cells or basal cells right now, but just know that these olfactory receptor cells have all these cilia, and these cilia are basically those dendritic receptor portions, just like our gustatory hairs. They're going to be the things interacting with these chemicals. Okay, so past the cribriform plate is where you're going to have your filaments. Filaments of the olfactory nerve. Okay, so let me try to do this one more time, and then we'll talk about that physiology. So in the roof of your nose, in the mucosal membrane, you have your olfactory cells. So the specific bone is this ethmoid bone with this cribriform plate. So this cribriform plate is the part of the ethmoid bone that has all these holes. Coming through these holes are these olfactory receptor cells. So these olfactory receptor cells penetrate through the cribriform plate, and at the end of it, you have these olfactory cilia. Let's just say that we bind something for a smell. Who cares what it is? Let's say a campfire. That's going to send a message up these olfactory receptor cells, up through the filaments of the olfactory nerve, and all of these, there's going to be a bunch of these receptor cells, right? All with these hairs. So these are all going to meet up, and we'll talk about where that is in a second, and then they're all just going to run as our olfactory nerve up to the brain. All right, again, where are we finding these olfactory cells, and we'll call them olfactory epithelium. So not epidermis, but epithelium. This is located in the mucosa of the roof. And remember, if you go back to Unit 2, we talk about different membranes, mucus, cutaneous, serous, synovial, all those. So these are mucous membranes on the roof of the nasal cavity. So let's do some physiology. Okay, so for smell physiology, gaseous molecules enter the nasal cavity. That'd be up through here. And I guess I'll just draw this again. So if this is my nose, gaseous molecules are going to enter the nasal cavity, and the roof of our nasal cavity, we have that mucus layer, and these gaseous molecules or chemicals are going to dissolve in our epithelial mucus. So here's a little bit of mucus, and we're going to get our chemical to dissolve in there. So those dissolved chemicals are going to bind to the receptor molecules of the olfactory cilia. So just like our gustatory hairs, we have these little extensions that are acting as receptors, and they're called olfactory cilia. So if I drew one, so let's just say this is an olfactory receptor cell, and that's an olfactory cilia acting as a receptor. So we'll get this receptor potential generated, so an action potential. And that action potential will be transferred through our filaments. So go back one. They're going to be transferred through our filaments, or these axons of these olfactory receptor cells. And they're going to meet, they're going to synapse at the glomeruli. So that word glomeruli is plural for this word glomerulus. And a glomerulus is just like a conglomeration or a big bundle of something. So you can have a glomeruli of nerves. You can have a glomeruli of blood vessels. So that's what this is just saying. It's saying all these filaments are going to synapse in one place, which would be technically here. And then these action potentials are going to be sent to the CNS via the olfactory tracts, the olfactory nerve. So that would come up here and then go up to our brain. And if it goes up to our brain, we're going to perceive it. It'll go to the thalamus and then project to our olfactory cortex. So again, let's do it one more time. We have this structure of our olfactory receptor, and we have a few different parts. We have the receptor cell, the actual sensory portion, and then the olfactory cilia at the very ends of that. Surrounding our olfactory receptor cells are supporting cells and basal cells, and then these axons of these olfactory receptor cells are going to make up these filaments of the olfactory nerve that are then going to run from this thing called a glomerulus. That was this word, from the glomerulus up the olfactory nerve to the central nervous system. And then you're going to say, oh, I smell something. All right, sweet. Let me see if there's anything else. I think we have functions of smell to do. One interesting thing about smell, if you guys remember, we talked about smell can really activate emotions. So if I have my cerebrum, cerebellum, midbrain, pons, medulla, spinal cord, thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and then I'm just going to do these things as basal nuclei. The most specific thing we're talking about is the amygdala. So if I'm going to smell something, let's say there's my nose up here and I'm going through that olfactory nerve, one thing I can do is I can come up here and I can go to my thalamus and project to my cortex. So that's when we know that's going to make us smell something. But let's say that we didn't actually smell something. Let's say that something like a pheromone, which you can have parts per billion, so super small amounts in the air, can still activate these sensory receptors. So you might actually not perceive the smell. It might not be strong enough to get it up to your cortex, but you might smell something and it'll run up here. And then instead of going through the thalamus, it might go to the hypothalamus over to this limbic system. And this limbic system might say, oh, I know that smell. I cried last time I smelled that smell. So we'll send a message through to our hypothalamus, which will regulate our autonomic nervous system activity through the medulla, and then maybe you'll get sweatiness and increased heart rate, all that kind of stuff. So basically what we're trying to say is that this amygdala limbic system can elicit an emotional response to an odor. And then we have our functions of smells. So just before how we were talking about with taste, having these autonomic nervous system things, we're going to have that with smell too. So for sympathetic, and let's just use logic, like let's say that you come across a bottle of gasoline, and even though gasoline might smell good to some people, it's not good to breathe in. So if you smell some gasoline or something, it might burn, it might you might notice an increase of heart rate immediately. Basically, anything that can be toxic, it's going to cause a fight or flight reaction. So if it's a really strong chemical, maybe you walk into your bathroom and you smell bleach, it's going to cause this fight or flight thing to get you out of that room. So the sympathetic stuff, we're going to say bad chemicals, so bad smelling chemicals. And when we mean bad, we mean potentially harmful to our body. So bad smells is going to activate the fight or flight. And that makes sense, right? If you're going to be walking into something that is going to harm you, so if you smell bleach for too long or something, then it makes sense that our sympathetic or fight or flight system takes over to get us away from that. Or we can have these parasympathetic impulses. So maybe you're at the top of your stairs at home and you smelt the Thanksgiving dinner going. So good smells, this can activate, again, saliva production and that gastric juice production of the stomach. And then another thing, a function of smell, so sneezing and coughing. These are both just like autonomic reflexes, and if you have the potential to ingest something toxic, so maybe you smelled something really bad, and then you immediately cough. Sneezing, this is kind of an interesting one, like let's say that you smell pollen. Basically what that just means is you're getting activation of some sort of receptor in your nose saying, hey, this is potentially allergenic. It's going to make you sneeze. So that would be the functions of smells. Detecting good and bad things. That's either going to, if it's bad, harm us, or if it's good, maybe give us some nutrients and whatnot. Okay, so this was a pretty short one, but this is smell. Hope this helps.